Hong Kong will not have an outdoor vigil for the Tiananmen massacre victims this year, the first time in the past 3 decades. But residents are determined to honor the dead in their own ways. The final results are in after Wuhan's initiative to test all of its residents. The results may surprise you. Despite ongoing Western condemnation for 2 decades, the CCP's persecution of a spiritual group continues in secret, although the regime claims the secret police agency has been disbanded. The latest effort to stop Beijing from influencing Hollywood, cutting federal help to studios if they bow to the pressure of censorship. And the widow of China's whistleblower Dr. Li Wenliang wrote on social media that she opposes U.S. lawmakers' plan to name a street outside the Chinese embassy in Washington after Dr. Li. But locals in Wuhan told media that the widow might have been pressured by Chinese authorities to make the statement. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Last week, we reported on Wuhan's initiative to test every one of its residents. 2/3 of the 9 million samples collected were tested, and the result was no confirmed cases. Now, all 9 million samples have been tested. Authorities say the final result is still no confirmed cases, but 300 asymptomatic cases were found. In China, asymptomatic cases are not included in confirmed cases.
没有发现确诊病例，检测无症状感染者300名。
They said these 300 asymptomatic cases aren't contagious and haven't infected other people.
没有发现无症状感染者传染他人的情况。
Chinese netizens have different opinions. 2 netizens discussed about the accuracy of the Chinese regime's figures. One netizen says he believes the figures because he knows hundreds of people in China and none of them are infected. Another responded that he doesn't want to discuss anymore because he doesn't have time to wake someone up who pretends to be asleep. The U.S. Department of State will hold an online candlelight vigil on June 3rd for the victims of the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. According to VOA, Bo Miller, a Chinese affairs officer from U.S. Department of State, invited all participants to record a short video, holding candles and talking about how the 1989 Tiananmen Square protesters inspired them, and upload this video on social media using the tag Tiananmen Square Vigil. The message went viral on social media. Many Hong Kongers say the U.S. is taking action to defeat the CCP and told everyone to join. Organizations, religious groups, individuals, and media from New York, Los Angeles, and Hong Kong are also holding commemorations of different forms and sharing this message with the world. African authorities issued a notice saying 268 nationals have been evacuated from China amid virus concerns and alleged racial discrimination. Nigeria's foreign minister said the evacuees endured a difficult time in China and are now settled in hotels where they will be quarantined for 14 days. Nigerians and other Africans are reportedly facing racial discrimination in China, especially in the south. This includes being barred from shopping malls, hospitals, and even their homes, as well as facing violence in the streets. Reuters is reporting that state-owned Chinese firms made 3 large purchases of soybeans from the U.S. on Monday. China said recently it would stop all purchases of American soybeans and pork after the U.S. removed Hong Kong's special economic status. U.S. traders say the orders are for October or November and total 180,000 tons. It's unclear what made Beijing change its mind. There's been no official announcement from the U.S. side. U.S. lawmaker Scott Perry introduced a bill in Congress to recognize the Tibet Autonomous Region as an independent country. A similar bill was also introduced for Hong Kong. Both bills were referred to the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. The bill comes amid growing tension between the U.S. and China over the coronavirus outbreak. Beijing sent troops into remote mountainous Tibet in 1950 and has ruled there with an iron fist ever since. Authorities banned the annual vigil for Tiananmen Square massacre victims, but Hong Kongers are committed to commemorating the dead in their own ways. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
Over 30 years ago, demonstrators, most of them students, occupied Tiananmen Square and asked for democracy in China. On June 3rd, tanks moved in and troops fired bullets into unarmed crowds in and around Tiananmen. Many were injured and killed, including the son of this man.
My son was shot by 4 bullets and was stabbed about 3 inches below his belly button. He died very miserably.
The young man was 20 years old. Bullets were found in his head, shoulder, and chest. He took hundreds of photos of the student demonstrations before he died.
My son is the hope of our family. Our entire family has been living a miserable life since he passed. We've been in this pain for 31 years. This will be the 31st anniversary of his death.
The massacre remains a taboo topic in China, and authorities claim no one was shot dead in Tiananmen Square. For the past 30 years, Hong Kong has been one of the few places where visuals of the victims can be held safely in China. Not this year. Police denied permission for the annual vigil, citing CCP virus concerns. The ban comes days after China passed a national security law that many fear could end the region's freedom. A witness to the 1989 massacre said seeing Beijing's move, memories of the crackdown are flooding back.
I thought I had left Tiananmen Square, but looking at what Hong Kong is like, I feel I never left Tiananmen, because the danger that Hong Kong is facing, the repression it's going to face, is no small thing.
Chan flew to Beijing in 1989 to support the pro-democracy protesters demonstrating on Tiananmen Square. He witnessed the massacre and filmed what he saw. When he left Beijing, a customs officer saw the film rolls when searching his bag.
He asked if I took them. I said yes. He asked me if it was of Tiananmen. I said yes. So he said, "Go. Please tell the whole world about the event." I think he knew the truth. So we took all the photos and videos out, and that was when I truly had a glimpse of China's heart.
Hong Kong residents are committed to remembering the crackdown despite the ban.
I can't be silent. If people tell me to keep silent, I won't. There's always something that I can do. It may not be very powerful, but every bit counts.
Online forums and the yearly vigils organizer have called on people to light candles to remember those who died in 1989. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo criticized Hong Kong authorities for banning the vigil on Twitter. He wrote, "If there is any doubt about Beijing's intent, it is to deny Hong Kongers a voice and a choice, making them the same as mainlanders. So much for two systems." Reporting by Juliet Song, NTD News, New York.
The U.S. is planning to name a street outside the Chinese embassy after a whistleblower doctor who died from the virus. But his widow says she opposes the idea. Locals say Chinese authorities could be pressuring her.
The widow of a Chinese whistleblower doctor is criticizing U.S. plans to name a street after him. Dr. Li Wenliang's widow, Fu Xiejie, wrote on social media that Li Wenliang was a Communist Party member. He loved his country. If he knew about this, he would not allow anyone to use his name to harm his country. Fu is pregnant, and she says she does not want too much attention. She hopes to not have to think about the sad incident. Chinese police punished Wuhan doctor Li Wenliang for warning colleagues about the virus outbreak in late December. He later caught the disease and died from it. His death caused public anger and grief in China, with many demanding freedom of speech. Earlier this month, Republicans in Congress introduced a bill to rename the street outside the Chinese embassy Li Wenliang Plaza. According to Radio Free Asia, the Communist Party's publicity department asked several state media to prepare for her statement a day before it was published. The outlet also cited unnamed sources in Wuhan, saying that Li's family members were constantly pressured by authorities to oppose U.S. lawmakers' plan. They say family members compromised and published the statement prepared by authorities, but without signing their names on it. The outlet said Fu cannot be reached for confirmation. Dr. Li's colleagues are also silent about this. One netizen commented under the widow's post, "This naming a street after Li isn't insulting our country. He helped all humanity, so the entire human world should memorialize him. This is something he deserves." Another wrote, "This is printed and not signed. I don't want to comment more. Please take care of yourself and your family." Another pled to the authorities, "Please don't mess with her anymore. I beg you. let her live her life. Wuhan rights activist Wang Qingyun filed an application to the local authorities asking them to make public the information regarding the case of 8 whistleblowers, including Li Wenliang. Chinese police summoned 8 people in January, accusing them of spreading false information online about the virus outbreak. Wuhan's city government refused the application, saying the case involves personal privacy. Wang says if the authorities didn't crack down on these whistleblowers, the outbreak wouldn't have been so severe. He says society has the right to know what happened.
An inside source reveals a notorious Chinese secret agency known for persecuting a spiritual group is still in operation, despite the regime's claims that it's not. The suppression continues just the same.
A secret Chinese police agency that played a key role in persecuting a spiritual group may no longer exist, but its crackdown of the group continues. That's according to Mingwei.org. The website publishes first-hand information about the persecution of Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa. It's a traditional Chinese spiritual discipline practiced by tens of millions of people. The 610 office was a Gestapo-like police agency established in 1999 to persecute Falun Gong. The office was known for illegally arresting and torturing Falun Gong practitioners. It was officially disbanded in 2018 when it was merged with a national commission. On Sunday, Mingwei published a report from an inside source. They said high-ranking official Zhao Leiji urged officials to continue persecuting Falun Gong. Zhao reportedly said the 610 office is disbanded, merged, and no longer exists independently. That's for show for the anti-China Western force, because they always argue about human rights and freedom. How can you believe that it's really disbanded? He continued, look, Falun Gong still exists. The issue is still there. It must be done quickly and must be done well. Zhao Leiji is one of the 7 members of the Politburo Standing Committee, the regime's highest decision-making body. He also heads a disciplinary body inside the Chinese Communist Party, the same commission the 610 office was merged with. Other evidence also suggests that the persecution continues. In January, Congress released a report on China's worsening human rights condition.
Falun Gong practitioners continue to face horrific conditions in detention, including violence, forced drug administration, sleep deprivation, and other forms of torture.
In April, the Epoch Times obtained internal documents also indicating the 610 office's function is being actively pursued by successor organizations.
We bring attention to it continually. We believe, frankly, must be done to stop it.
Mingwei's 2019 annual review found that 774 Falun Gong practitioners in China were sentenced because of their faith. 96 practitioners are confirmed dead as a result of the persecution. Due to the difficulty of getting information out of China, the real number is believed to be much higher.
We spoke with one Wuhan resident who believes the CCP virus could have been spreading widely there as early as October. She was admitted to a hospital back then with all the symptoms of the virus. She said the hospital was overwhelmed with people showing the same symptoms. NTD's Xiaohua Li explains.
One Wuhan woman's story suggests the CCP virus could have been spreading widely in Wuhan as early as October. Ms. Wang developed a persistent cough and fever last October and went to a hospital after vomiting blood. She was confirmed to have a severe lung infection and was immediately admitted. She says the hospital was overwhelmed with patients showing similar symptoms.
It was extremely busy and tense with very few beds. There were both young and old people there, mostly older people. They all had lung infections.
Ms. Wang left the hospital after her symptoms eased, but in January the hospital phoned her and asked her to come back for treatment. This was before the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, first admitted human-to-human transmission of the virus on January 20th. But Wang was too busy to go back for treatment.
Dr. Huang Ying is my attending physician. She and the head nurse called me and said I wasn't cured yet and they would give me free treatment. She must have suspected that I was infected with the virus.
In March or April, Ms. Wang wondered if she really had been infected with the virus back in October. She phoned the hospital's head nurse to find out, but the response she got shocked her.
I called the head nurse, but she wouldn't admit it was her. I said I have her contact on my phone. How could it not be her? Then I asked her how Dr. Huang Ying was doing, and she said there was no such doctor.
Dr. Huang Ying was uncontactable. Ms. Wang knew that around that time, an unknown doctor had died at this hospital. Wang suspected it was Dr. Huang Ying. Dr. Huang Ying is listed on the hospital's official website as a general internal medicine physician, specializing in lung and respiratory-related diseases. It says she's worked at the hospital for 10 years. Ms. Wang still isn't sure why they tried to hide it. The CCP's delay in admitting human-to-human transmission cost Wuhan dearly. Before it warned residents in January, residents held a dance competition and many companies organized staff to participate. On January 18th, the local government allowed 40,000 families to gather for a potluck, resulting in 57 residential buildings being labeled as fever buildings.
An update on the movie industry. Senator Ted Cruz is seeking to limit federal help to film studios who comply with Chinese censorship. He says the move should act as a wake-up call to Hollywood productions who are bending under the regime's coercion.
In an effort to stop Beijing's censorship in Hollywood, Texas Senator Ted Cruz introduced a bill in late May. If passed, it would cut off federal assistance to Hollywood studios if they censor their films in China.
It's common practice for major Hollywood films to contract with the Pentagon to use jets and tanks and to film on bases and aircraft carriers. The Script Act should be a wake-up call for Hollywood. Studios would be forced to choose between the assistance from the federal government or the money that they want from China.
In 2019, China's movie market raked in over $9 billion, only second to the U.S. For Hollywood's top 25 grossing films, more than 10% of their global box office revenue came from China. Hollywood is an important part of American pop culture and was once a synonym for the American dream, but now it increasingly complies with Beijing's censorship in exchange for a piece of their lucrative market.
Beijing censors are quick to edit or outlaw movies that criticize China, even in minor ways. For the movie World War Z, they had to cut the script's mention of a virus because it originated in China. The movie Red Dawn was digitally edited to make the villains North Korean, not Chinese.
Similar changes were made to 2016 superhero film Doctor Strange. Marvel's original comics feature a Tibetan character known as Ancient One, but in the movie, the character was made to be Celtic instead, so as not to offend the regime.
In the Top Gun sequel that's set to come out later this year, the Taiwanese and Japanese flags on the back of Maverick's jacket were removed to appease the Chinese Communist Party. Think about that for a second. What message does it send that Maverick, an American icon, is apparently afraid of the Chinese communists? That's ridiculous.
China only allows about 40 films into its market each year. Many studios seek to appease China and put up with its censorship in a bid to push their productions into the country's 70,000 theaters.
The number is deliberately kept low. And in exchange for access, American film companies submit their films to China's censors, who often force them to change those films. American companies have learned this fact, and they'll often change the films even in advance of submitting. As a result, they control not just what audiences see in China, but also what Americans see.
To bypass the 40-film quota, American producers often partner with Chinese production companies.
Many U.S. studios participate in official Sino-U.S. film co-productions, which circumvent the film quota in return for allowing Chinese regulators to shape content at every stage of the production process.
One example being the $150 million 2016 film, The Great Wall, starring Matt Damon. The movie was criticized for whitewashing after its release and underperformed globally. It lost as much as $75 million. Besides policing content, Beijing also bans particular actors from appearing on screen if they speak out against the regime.
You know, there are actors that are not allowed to be in certain movies, that can't get Hollywood blockbuster movies because you can't distribute it in China. They won't let you, like Richard Gere. You can't have Richard Gere movies in China because he's pro-Tibet.
An outspoken human rights activist, Gere, starred in a 1997 film called Red Corner. The production is banned in China because it includes content that sheds light on the corruption in China's judicial system. Brad Pitt was also banned in China up until 2014 because of his role in a film about the Chinese regime's controversial takeover of Tibet. While strictly limiting American films in China, Chinese companies have, on the other hand, been buying up American theaters and studios. In 2012, Chinese production company Wanda bought the second largest theater chain in the U.S., AMC, for $2.6 billion. A few years later, in 2016, it bought leading Hollywood production company, Legendary Entertainment, for $3.5 billion. Chinese tech companies Tencent and Alibaba are also increasingly investing in Hollywood film studios. California Congressman Brad Sherman represents more of the area home to the U.S. film industry than any other official.
And we are so proud that we in Southern California shape the world's dreams and the world's thoughts. But there are those who think they should be shaped in Beijing to promote China's preferred narratives.
He says the Chinese regime's economic coercion is interfering with the freedom of expression in the U.S. But now, as the pandemic persists, that economic power has been wounded. Movie theaters in China have been closed since late January. They're expecting to reopen in June, but this year's box office revenue could be cut in half, predicted to reach only about $4.2 billion. Hollywood was also disrupted. Film productions have ground to a halt, and major film releases have been canceled or delayed until next year, or even to 2022. With the growing number of countries calling to investigate China's role in the pandemic and U.S.-China tensions on the rise, Hollywood may be forced to rethink its cozy relationship with China after all.
The UK's Foreign Secretary today saying the UK has a duty to the people of Hong Kong. Beijing is increasingly drawing Hong Kong into its orbit, and there's more pressure on the UK and the world to act. Our UK correspondent Jane Worrell reports from London.
British joint declaration.
The UK Foreign Secretary speaking in Parliament saying the UK will stand by the people of Hong Kong if China follows through with what it calls a new national security law.
And Mr. Speaker, I hope the whole House agrees that we as the United Kingdom have historic responsibilities, a duty, I would say, to the people of Hong Kong.
If Beijing follows through with its repressive law in Hong Kong, the UK says it will extend visa rights to some Hong Kongers who have a BNO passport. It would mean they will be able to study and work in the UK for up to 12 months. Anyone who was born before 1997 in Hong Kong is eligible for one. That's about 3 million Hong Kongers. But many say more needs to be done, like the last governor of Hong Kong, Chris Patten, who spoke online on Tuesday during a House of Lords debate.
I welcome what the government have said about passports, but there is a lot more to do to demonstrate our legal and moral obligations to what was, of course, a British colonial territory.
He led an effort of what's now 787 politicians and policymakers in 38 countries who called out Beijing's move, describing it as a flagrant breach of the Sino-British Joint Declaration.
I think every democratic nation would see this as being a huge step backwards. I think it's very important now that all democratic states who are critical of these actions stand together and put pressure on China to back off.
The new law is a mortal blow to the city's freedoms, and an increasing number of politicians are pushing for a global response. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signed a bill today that toughens the U.S. response to a brutal Chinese crackdown on ethnic minorities, sending a clear message to China of U.S. support, hoping to push Beijing on human rights.
Over the years, there has been a real commitment to shining a bright light on human rights violations in China, and to say to those who are affected by that, you are not alone.
The House and Senate passed the bipartisan bill. It would impose sanctions on Chinese officials involved in the mass surveillance and detention of Uyghurs and other ethnic groups in the western Xinjiang region.
This is a genocide. More than 1 million people are in concentration camps. Millions more are harassed every single day.
The measure now needs a signature from President Donald Trump. The president says he'll very strongly consider it. U.S.-China tensions are high over the Chinese regime's handling of the CCP virus outbreak and Beijing's plan to restrict civil liberties in Hong Kong.
Stocks rise despite protests. Low demand from rental companies hurts car makers, and more in business news.
Stocks rose on the prospect of the country reopening, offsetting worries about the nationwide protests. Crude oil prices also rose to more than $36 a barrel, hitting a 3-month high. Economic data from a U.S. manufacturing index shows its first upturn since January. The collapse of air travel pushed big car rental companies to cancel orders for new vehicles, punching a hole in sales for nearly a dozen U.S. automakers. That includes the big three in Detroit. Automakers could lose up to 12% of their annual U.S. vehicle sales in 2020. The Food and Drug Administration plans to allow more companies to make hand sanitizer. The FDA says it will expand the kinds of companies allowed to make the product. That's because the demand for sanitizer is outpacing the supply during the pandemic. The European Commission is trying to change the way drugs are made. This is an effort to prevent shortages and improve drug distribution. People are recognizing flaws in the healthcare system and the EU's dependency on foreign supplies, mostly from China. The EU has long experienced drug shortages. The pandemic only made things worse. Details on planned improvements are coming later this year.
Life is back on the streets of Paris as lockdown measures were further eased in France today. Our France correspondent David Vivez has the story.
Everyone out. This is the phrase millions of French have been waiting to say as parks, cafes, and restaurants reopen after weeks of lockdown. In the Butte-Chaumont Park, walkers mix with joggers and people practicing Qigong.
It's great. It's just great. To practice exercise, to practice Qigong, and outside it's like, wow, life again,
In Luxembourg Park, which opened this weekend, the crowds were huge and the little boats were sailing.
I have a balcony, but it was really frustrating for me to stay home for 2 months. Now I find nature again. That's extraordinary. We need to see life around us.
The streets also welcomed life again, with the opening of the places inescapable for most Parisians, cafes. Parisians enjoyed their morning ritual of coffee and croissants. That's the case for this cafe at Bastille. It has a large terrace. After 2 months of lockdown, Anthony Rodriguez was back to work this morning.
We had to wake up at 6 this morning. It was a bit complicated, but we're happy to be here.
With some adjustments made regarding social distancing and hygiene measures.
Tables must be 4 feet away from one another in length and width. We will print disposable menus for the customers.
Lockdown measures will be eased further in France on June 22nd. Following the French government's timeline, this is the date when all shops will be able to fully reopen to the public. Reporting by David Vivez, NTD News, Paris.
Here at China in Focus, we dedicate ourselves to bringing you truthful, unbiased reporting. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the latest updates, and see you tomorrow.